One of my favorite things about a show is the characters, from their protagonists to the secondary characters and even the ones who don't do a lot. And MLP is no different to this, but sometimes characters that fans were excited to explore don't get developed, or in the other hand, the character goes in a different direction. And this is where the comics come into play, because sometimes these characters get a story where they get the development that they needed, and sometimes they even become better than their show counterparts. Hello everyone, my name is Sugarflake and today let's see the MVP characters that the comics got right. Let's begin with not one, but rather two characters. This one's being Big Mac and Zecora. Now the reason why I'm pairing the two is because they serve a similar role in the show. They're secondary characters that every once in a while they have a role in an episode. And while they're not bad in the show, these two are way better in the comics, beginning with Big Mac. Big Mac in the comics is a character that surprisingly had a lot of development, from his past with his old friend and rival to being a famous ex-racer, and even helping Applejack to conquer her fear of water in a pretty sweet way, or even being a pretty useful ally to the main six in some stories like in Cosmos. But the aspect that makes Big Mac so awesome in the comics is his Chad level behavior. Okay, let me explain. Big Mac is no stranger to ships in the show or by fans, from Cheerly to Fluttershy, Marble, and finally Sugarbelle, but Big Mac in the comics is in a whole different level, and apparently he's so unresistible that he catches the eye of Twinkleshine, Bon Bon, Sweet Scoops, Fleetfoot, T-Love, and even Luna in the same comic. And while all of this is not to be taken seriously, it's funny to think that the writers made Big Mac so unresistible for some reason. But then we have Zecora. Zecora in the show is the local potion maker, and in a lot of episodes she doesn't do a lot. Of course, she has her moments like in the season 4 premiere or the episode Cutie Pox. But as a whole, she's not that important of a character, but Zecora in the comic is the complete opposite of this, as she plays important roles in some comics, like in issue 5 where she helps Fluttershy with her talking animal problem, or in issue 21 where she teams up with Spike to cure a mysterious flu. And that's not all, as Zecora will also serve as a narrator in some comics, which in and of itself is kind of weird but also quite cool in a meta way. But of course, you know, and I know that the reason why Zecora is in this video is because of her arc in season 10. In season 10 we saw an arc where Zecora goes back to her original village, and it's in here where we see how Zecora's life was before leaving for Ponyville. But also we saw her old group of friends and even answering some questions like why she talks in rhymes. But also throughout the comic we see a side of Zecora that we really didn't see in the show, and that was a more flawed side. Zecora in the show is a character that normally gives advice to other characters and is seen as a wise and intelligent figure. But in this story we see a side of Zecora which is more stubborn, irresponsible, and sometimes unlikable, especially with young Zecora, where we see that she was obsessed with learning magic and even telling one of her teachers that she will be one of the first zebras to use it. Something that her teacher scoffs as a childish dream, and it's in here where Zecora not only wants to prove that she can use magic, but she obsesses to the point of isolating herself from her friends and even lashing out at them, and even telling them, "You may be fine with being boring your whole life, but I'm not." With this sentence being the final nail in the coffin for their friendship, something that took a big toll on Marini and her group of friends, and while at the end everything works out and Zecora and her friends even becoming part of the Elements of Harmony, this doesn't change the overall message this comic has and Zecora, which is, it's okay to have ambition, maybe a career or a goal in life, but not if this goal is going to ruin a relationship or your life. Sure, it might not seem like this in the beginning, but one day you wake up and you realize that something got left behind. And in a way, what makes Zecora better in the comics is how different she is from her show counterpart, and you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way. And this is also something that I could say for our next character. Our next character is not from G4, but rather G5, and a character that deserves so much better than what we got in the show, and this character is Pipp. Now, Pipp is a character that was pretty shallow in G5, she literally was just an influencer, she liked trends, and the only thing that she wanted or cared about was to be popular. And this was how she was in both shows, and while Pipp in Tell Your Tale is at least fun to watch and her Make Your Mark counterpart is just bad, This too doesn't compare to how she was in the comics. Now, Pipp in the comics started the same way as how she was in the show, but the more issues came out, the more Pipp got developed. From her being a detective to find more about Discord's story, to her dealing with Zip and sometimes struggling with her decisions or actions, or the arc she goes through in issue 4. Because yeah, believe it or not, Pipp has an arc in the comics where we see her going from an influencer to a pony that her followers can look up to. In this story we see that Pipp wants to change her content to be more relatable and meaningful. So how does she accomplish this? Well, she writes a post about the day everyone realized she can't fly, and while Pipp likes the idea, her mom doesn't, and this is because it's different from the content her fans are used to. But Pipp tells her that sure, it's different from what she usually posts, but that she wants to show her fans her more real side. And with this she writes and posts her story, and it does horribly. So much so that Pipp gets frustrated because it doesn't have the views she expected and goes to delete it. But before she can do that, she gets a message from a pony called Felicity, a unicorn that told a bunch of lies to her friends to make her seem more interesting. But it wasn't long until one of her friends figured out that she was lying. This made her feel ashamed and sad, but then she saw Pipp's post and she realized that she wasn't alone and gave her the courage to apologize to her friends and face her reality, even if it was mundane. This comic not only humanized Pipp in a way that we really didn't see in the show, but also gave us an arc that we would continue to see in later issues, where we continue to see Pipp struggles with her new content and sometimes even with Zip. But that's not all, as the writers will also give Pipp new personality traits where sometimes Pipp could be more laid back, sometimes she could be more feisty and willing to defend herself in a more explosive way, and sometimes she can be even a troll. And in a way, it's surprising that the most mundane G5 character became one of the best ones in the comics, and it's surprising that the best one became the worst one in the comics. But Pipp is not the only character that went from forgettable to fleshed out, because we also have the Pillars of Equestria. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I never was the biggest fan of the Pillars, but the concept of the Pillars is actually quite awesome. The legends of old Equestria get out of limbo and now they need to defeat an old friend turned enemy. This was an awesome concept for a season finale, but the execution wasn't handled so well. But hey, it's not all bad because the Pillars at least gave us some good episodes, right? No? Okay, jokes aside, I feel like the Pillars could have done a little bit more, especially Stygian, Mistmane, and Flash Magnus. So what about the comics? Well, the Pillars in the comics are better, not only because they do more, but also because they give them more character development and depth in their own 13-part series.
Oh! It's my bitch. I give you one. What are you talking about? Fuck no, baby!
Called Legends of Magic. Although before you get too excited, the first 6 comics in this series are just tales and stories to introduce the Pillars in the comics, and these stories are okay. They're not bad, but they're not good, and as a whole, if you're planning to read any of these issues, I would recommend you read the one with your favorite pillar. Except issue 1, this one is a must read because of young Celestia and Luna. But as a whole, you can skip to issue 7 and honestly you wouldn't miss anything that important. But it's in issue 7 when everything picks up as we get to see how the Pillars became the heroes of Equestria with the help of Stygian. But believe it or not, this is not what I like about this story, but rather the relationship Stygian had with the Pillars, because I found their relationship pretty sweet, from Somnambulous and Mage Meadowbrook, words of wisdom, and the way they tried to hype up Stygian to Starsoul, to Flash Magnus' doubt towards him as a hero, or Stygian's relationship with Rockhoof, which is both intriguing and incredibly funny to see. And why not, even Mistmane acting like a mentor towards Stygian. And it's ironic that the weakest dynamic Stygian has is with Starsoul. This is until issue 13 and 14 where the dynamics goes from boring and predictable to chaotic and even dramatic, where Stygian had to ignore Starsoul's warning to not intervene, and at the end Stygian became the hero of the story, but also in a way dooming his own future for obvious reasons. This story is great if you want to learn more about the pillars of Equestria, or, like me, if you want to learn more about the GOAT that is Stygia, and while he doesn't see himself as a hero, he's one in my eyes. But the pillars aren't the only characters that got more developed in the comics, because we also have Princess Celestia. So, Princess Celestia, she's a character that I always love, from her design, which was pretty unique back in season 1, to her voice and relationship with Twilight. But despite my absolute love for Celestia, I can't deny that she was a pretty disappointing character. And this was simply because she doesn't do much in the show, and in a way it's actually shocking how little she actually does. And worst of all, we really didn't get to know a lot about her, and what we got to see was pretty surface things like she likes cake, she has a pet phoenix, she vanished Luna to the moon, and that she was a bad actress? Okay, so how about the comics? Well, originally Celestia was pretty similar to her show counterpart. She was calm, wise, and as a whole is pretty much Celestia in early seasons of the show. But something magical would happen, and this would all change in later issues. And now Celestia acted more laid back, irresponsible, and sometimes incredibly chaotic, especially when paired with her sister Luna. And you know what? I absolutely love this dynamic. While we saw this in the show, especially in episodes like Between Dark and Dawn, the comics made their dynamic more believable as sisters, from them being excited because they want to compete on their sisterhood social, to them arguing over who has the best pet. Or even their dynamic that they had when they were younger, where Celestia was kind of a prick because she bullied Luna constantly, all because she wasn't at her same level of magical knowledge. And even when they're not doing exciting stuff, they're entertaining to see. And while this Celestia sounds like a more wacky and unpredictable character, she really isn't. Because despite the comedic exterior that Celestia has in the comics, she also has a much more serious and at times tragic side to her, as we see her failures, like in the fall of Sunset Shimmer, where she loses her student all because she wasn't a good enough teacher, or in Reflections where she literally loses the love of her life, or the multiple times she struggled with what others thought of her. An aspect that you really wouldn't expect the comics to tackle, but they do. From stories like Princess for One Less Day, where Celestia realizes that she still has a lot of things to improve as a ruler, to the short story The Pony Who Has Everything, where we have a story about Celestia wanting to have a free day and not to worry about her responsibilities as a ruler, which also gave Celestia a great dynamic and character development with Discord. Celestia in the comics is flawed, and maybe a lot of people might say that she's unfit to be the ruler, but in my opinion this Celestia is great because of how relatable she actually was, and despite her flaws, at its core she always was willing to help the ponies she cared about. And while Celestia is not the best princess in the show, she's the best princess, at least in my opinion, in the comics. But we still have one more character, a character that I wasn't the biggest fan at first, but that thanks to the comics became not only one of my favorite characters, but one that was so much better than the one we got in the show, this character being Discord. Now, I think you all know how I feel about Discord. I don't like him, I find him annoying, unfunny, and it doesn't help that his reformation didn't feel earned. So how about the comics? Well, it's better. Not only better, but Discord in the comics is what I would love to see from the show. Beginning with Discord's personality and redemption story. In the comics we see Discord go from a bitter, selfish, and egotistical character to one that learns to care about others and accepting his new path to being a better person, but unlike the show, this journey is not that easy, and this is simply because ponies still see Discord as a villain. In a lot of issues, ponies still treat Discord as if he's going to do something bad, like in issue 2 of Friends Forever, where Apple Bloom thinks that Discord is going to mess up their apples, or in the short story The Pony Who Has Everything, where Celestia thinks that Discord's actions was to dethrone her, or in the story A-Court, where the main 6 aside of Fluttershy tell Discord to be less random and to be more normal. And even Princess Luna, someone who was a villain, even she doesn't want to help Discord because she doesn't trust him. And this aspect is something that not only helps Discord to have a more meaningful reformation, but also helps us understand Discord as a character. Discord is a character that is insecure of being his true self. He thinks that if he's himself, people won't like him. Like in the story A-Court, where he changes to be more organized and normal, not because he wants to, but rather because Twilight told him to. fearing that if he doesn't fit in then his friends might leave him, and even when Discord got over that, there still was one more problem, which was letting others care about him. We saw this on issue 20 where Discord is accidentally destroying Ponyville when he's asleep, with Luna being the one to try and help him, and while the comic is comedic in nature, at the end we learn what Discord nightmares were all about. And this was Discord fearing hurting those who are close to him and thinking that caring for someone makes him weak. Because at the end of the day, he's an unpredictable force of nature. It isn't in his nature to care about others. But he has found ponies that are worth caring about, something that scares him because it's a new feeling. So he thought if he didn't make it so obvious, maybe he wouldn't need to care so much if something bad happened to them. But Luna tells him that caring for others doesn't make you weak, but rather strong, and with enough care, you can even change yourself for the better. Life is unpredictable, you can't control what happens in the future, so instead, live life like there's no tomorrow. Care about those who are near you because maybe one day you won't be there to tell them yourself. Of course, Discord will always be a comedic character first, and there are comics that better represent this aspect of Discord. But to me, the aspect that made Discord so great in the comics was his redemption story and the reward at the end. But of course, this is all my opinion, but what do you guys think? What other MLP characters were better in the comics and why? Leave it down in the comments, and as always, remember to like the video if you enjoyed it and consider subscribing for more MLP videos like this one, and as always, remember to take care guys, and I'll see you in the next video.